Okay, so lucky last on the list we have the bank option for everything relating to the jog wheel and the previous and next buttons. Well, not quite last, we'll talk about the master as well, but the bank option, just like the channel option we discussed a couple of videos back, it banks basically in entire banks of 16 for the case of the FaderPort 16, or if you're using a FaderPort 8 it'll be banks of 8 faders. So what this means is, if you have a look on the top left here, I'm now on channel 1 Dave, so if I just show this in MixCraft so we know exactly what I'm talking about. This is the bank position we're in at the moment, hard left, or right up to the top of the very first channel in our session, which if I select it in MixCraft you'll see it reflected in the selections here in the FaderPort. So that's number 2 and back to number 1. Now if I hit the bank option, given that this channel has, let's just have a little scroll down in MixCraft first and show how many channels we're dealing with. So we have 28 including the master track. So not quite 32, so we don't have 2 banks of 16, but we've got 1 bank of 16 and then another bank of 12 on top of that. So if you have a look at what happens though, when I bank across, I've got bank selected here, and I'll press the next button, and it doesn't change anything in the vision that you see in MixCraft, but on the FaderPort it's actually moved everything along so that channel number, not number 17, but channel number 13 here is now what we see at the hard left, because it's filling out the whole bank of faders rather than moving everything along and then having blank faders at the end here, which is less practical because it wants to give you as much to work with as possible at any given time. So because we don't quite have another full 16 faders to go to, it's just gone all the way to the very last one, and the very last one is the master fader in this case. If I move that up and down, you'll see the master fader here move up and down accordingly as well. So if I now in MixCraft just scroll down so we can see what channel 13 is, so this is the right half of our synth channel, which is panned left and right because it's a stereo pair from the audio that I brought into this session. So then if I scroll down, we'll see our master track at the bottom there, and moving that fader once again, that's the very end of our session. So just while we're on the subject of the master fader as well, if I happen to be, for instance, in the first bank, so while I'm on bank here, if I bank back to channel 1, this is where we are now in MixCraft and in the fader bank as well. We have channel 1 showing at the hard left. So now I can't see the master channel in the FaderPort, so this will actually move channel 16. I have to scroll along a bit here in MixCraft for you to see that, I think, which is channel 16 is one of the bass channels here, and you can see that one moving around, but that doesn't help if I want to move the master fader and I'm banked all the way to the left in the FaderPort. So if you can imagine, I might have a few banks of 16 in a rather big session, then it might be a bit inconvenient every time to have to bank all the way to the one on the far right to be able to get to the master fader each time. So if I go back to the left, and then instead of being on bank, all I have to do is click on master here, and now the jog wheel actually becomes the control for the master fader. So I can always get to my master fader with one touch without actually having to bank across to it and see it specifically on the FaderPort, because I can just turn the jog wheel into the master fader by pressing the master button, and then back to bank or whatever I need to be on for other functionality. But bank basically you can think of as moving just like we did with the channel banking, and moving one step at a time or one channel at a time with channels. When you're on bank, it moves in banks of 16, so 16 faders at a time, or as many as it needs to fill out the last bank, depending on how many channels are actually in your session.